Hey everybody, welcome back to the Print 3D channel. It's time for another unboxing and first impressions of some new filament. On today's episode, it's Matterhackers Build Series filament, and I can't wait to share my results with you guys, so stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back, and thank you for joining me here for another unboxing and first impressions of some new filament. On today's episode, it's Matterhackers Build Series filament. This is actually their standard series filament, and it's been rebranded as the MH Build Series, or Matterhackers Build Series filament. And it's actually some really great filament. If you follow my channel for any period of time, you know during the 365 project for the last quarter, we actually printed with their standard series filament, and they just recently rebranded it as the MH Build Series. So I thought I would give it a shot as some fresh filament, because during the 365 project, I really didn't have any time to do a real official unboxing or testing of the filament. I just jumped right in and started printing. I did have to adjust some of my settings, but I wanted to do this all over again for you guys as an unboxing and first impressions video. But before we get started, a little disclaimer. I was not compensated in any way for my review of the Matterhackers Build Series filament. This filament was sent to the channel for free for review, and we weren't compensated in any way. So let's get started with the unboxing. The Matterhackers filament arrived in a nice branded box and some heavy-duty cardboard, and they actually use paper instead of bubble wrap as their packing material, which I thought was really nice, and it's a lot greener for the environment. The first roll of filament that we got was some PETG. Now I noticed the first thing is this really cool new branding label that they've used for the MH Build Series, and it actually says refill materials, which I thought was pretty cool. All the information for the PETG was right there on the label. It was perfectly visible, all the settings we would need, and this is some really great green filament. Now I've never printed with PETG before, and I'll probably start printing with this soon as I figure out how to print with it. The next roll that we got was some of their blue filament. Now I've printed with this before. Again, it's nicely labeled, and they have their cool little branding. This is some really great filament, but what I noticed was that the bag was unvacuum sealed, but that's okay. The third roll of filament they sent us was their black filament, which I like too. This is some really great filament. Again, all the labeling was right on the top. You could definitely see what was going on with the filament that you'd purchased. And of course, that cool new Matterhackers Build logo. So we had 3 rolls of filament to choose from. And of course, I wasn't going to be able to print with the PETG right away, but I'm definitely going to print with it soon. And the first roll we're going to open will be the blue, since the vacuum seal is kind of already popped on that one, and I'll just go ahead and open that one up and get printing with it, just to make sure it's okay. So of course, you know, we won't have a vacuum seal pop, but I did smell that fresh PLA as soon as I opened up the packaging. And again, this is some really sturdy plastic it's wrapped in. And there's our little silica bag, of course, to keep our filament dry. And I do like this heavy-duty plastic. I really wanted to save one of these labels, but I couldn't get it torn off of there without tearing it up. So the filament itself, the roll, has some nice little retainer holes, and it does have a hole near the center spool so you can see when you're running out of filament. And there's retainer holes on both sides so you can clip in your filament. And it's labeled really well, and there is a lot number on there, so if you have some problems with the filament, you can report that to Matterhackers. And this is some really great filament. Like I said, I've printed with this before. Now, they do use this little packing tape to seal the end of the filament onto the spool. I'm not a big fan of this kind of tape, but it works. Little strands will come off of this because it is shipping packing tape, and it's designed for cardboard boxes. But it does the job of holding down the filament. And of course, I always like to clip off about a good foot and a half of filament and just toss that out because I don't want to use it, because it's at the end of the spool, and there could have been some problems with the extrusion process, and I don't want to have to deal with that glue being on the end of the roll there from the tape. So as you can see, there's another little piece right there. The filament itself is actually pretty springy. A lot of the filaments I've used before are really soft, and I noticed this was actually a little bit hard to wrangle because it did have quite a lot of density, or I guess it would be that the filament is a little stiffer. So when it does bend, you get that little bit of a white area in the filament. So the first thing we're going to do, as always with my testing, is to do a bend test. And the surface finish is really nice. I do love this blue filament. So let's go ahead and give it the bend test. And it takes quite a few bends in different directions and twists just to break off the filament, and that's always a really good sign to start with. The next thing I always like to do is do a clip test, and I like to hear a nice soft clip when I'm clipping the filament. And that sounded really good. It's a little stiffer than some of the other filaments, but it does pass those bend tests, and it did pass the clip test nicely, so it's time to check the diameter on this filament. I like to kind of straighten out the filament as much as I can before I start doing my diameter test, especially with this kind of filament, because it has a tendency to be a little bit on the springy side, like I said, because it is wrapped so tightly around the spool. And then we'll start taking our measurements. As you can see, it was a little hard to wrangle. And we're at 0, so let's go ahead and take our first measurement. It's 1.70. We'll do it again just to make sure, 1.70. And we'll move along on the filament roll here, and 1.71, 1.72, not too bad. As you can see, it's getting a little tough to wrangle. Our third measurement, 1.73. And our fourth measurement, 1.72. Our fifth measurement, 1.73. And one final one, 1.71. So that gives you a good idea of the diameter consistency of the Matterhackers Build Series filament, which is pretty consistent with most of the PLAs in this type of price point. But either way, I was ready to start printing. Once we got the filament out of the box, it was time to start printing. The first thing I printed out was the Cali Cat, and this is my usual first print model when I unbox some filament. And it actually turned out really good. I am super happy with the results. There is a little bit of an area of concern here on the tail, but I get that every time I print the Cali Cat because my seam is in the back right corner, and that happens to be where the tail lands. But the print itself, it turned out awesome. All the detail on the face is there. All the surface texture is really, really smooth. There were no problems whatsoever. The next thing I printed out was the benchy model, and that actually turned out really good too. There were no problems with this print. I did move my seam to a different location, which is in the back corner again, and the benchy actually prints in this direction like this, so the seam runs along the hull here. But the rest of the print turned out great. All the overhangs look really, really nice. The top layers are really smooth, especially on the decking, and you can read the word benchy on the back, and the bottom turned out okay, but I do have my first layer set at 110% on the height and the width, just to add a little bit more plastic down for bed adhesion, so you really can't see the 3D benchy on the bottom part. But the rest of the print looks really, really good, and I was super happy with the results. There is a little bit of stringing going on, but it's more like wisping. It isn't really stringing because it just falls right off as soon as you touch it. The next thing we printed out was Filament from Matterhackers, and this is their cool little mascot. And I actually print these out at 50% because it makes about an hour and 45-minute print, and I usually print them out at a 0.2 millimeter layer height. Almost every model that you see printed here was printed at a 0.2 millimeter layer height, except for the vase, which we did at a 0.24 millimeter layer height, but I'll get to that in a little bit. Filament actually turned out awesome. There were no problems at all. I really love this model. I like printing them out at 50% because it gives the G-Max a really good chance to bring out all the detail on this model, and everything turned out great. Even the back of his backpack is nice and smooth, and that's a real area of cooling and concern with a lot of prints that I've seen of the filament. But he turned out great, and I didn't have any problems. After that, we loaded up a low polygon model, and this is Beto, and this is from Flowalistik. And I'll put all the links for everything that we used in our testing down in the description so you guys can print these yourself. And I like printing out a low polygon model when I'm doing my filament testing because it really gives you a chance to see how the surface texture looks. And this print turned out awesome. There were no problems whatsoever. As soon as we were done with B2, we loaded up the spiral tower from Jukka. And this one has a ton of detail on it. And this actually turned out great. All the little top layers turned out really, really nice. I do print these with 5 top layers and minimal infill. That way the print can take a little less time and use less plastic because you really want to see the detail. And there is a lot of top layers in these and a lot of little arches and a lot of little brick detail. And all of that turned out really, really good. I am super happy with the results. I really love the look of this black filament. Once we were done with that, it was time to print out a maker coin. And I haven't printed out one of these in a long time. And it really turned out good. The only problem I saw was when it was doing the top layers, It goes in, my extruder goes in a couple of different directions, so it did change the look or the surface color of the filament, but the actual print turned out great. I am super happy with the results. I really love to see my maker coin in different filaments, and I did use that enhanced gap fill feature in Simplify 3D to make sure all my letters filled in, and they filled in really, really nice. And there was very minimal stringing or wisping on this print as well. And I wanted to switch over to the blue, but I wanted to print out a 2-color model of my maker coin because that's one of my favorite things to do, because this model is pretty much set up to do 2 colors. You could probably do multiple colors on this if I had such as a mosaic palette for my Gmax 1.5 XT Plus, but I just do a simple change filament command, and I loaded up the blue filament, which is one of my favorite colors of the Matterhackers build series filament. During the 365 project, I printed a lot of stuff with this. And this actually turned out good. This is a very good color comparison between the black and the blue, and it really looks awesome. The next thing I printed out was another filament at 50%, and he really turned out awesome. This blue filament has kind of a glass-like look to it when it's finally printed, and it really looks great. And all the detail on filament turned out really good. All the parts of the little spacesuit that he's wearing, and of course the little Matterhackers logo. And it's a really clean printing filament. I really love this blue stuff. Once the filament was done, it was time to print out the Lion HD model. And this is one of my favorite models because it's a high polygon model. It does take a little bit longer to print, but you really get some good results if you have your settings dialed in really well. And in this Matterhackers build series filament in the blue, the lion turned out stellar. This is one of my favorite prints so far to doing the testing on this, because this really does look like blue glass. I mean, it turned out amazing. All the detail in the face, there were no problems whatsoever with this print. And I like printing him out at this size now because he has these 3 small footprints that join up and create the body, so it's a good test. And there was literally minimal stringing or wisping between the 2 legs and the body, so it was a really clean print. Once we had the Lion HD printed out, it was time to print out the Hookah Vase, and this is one of my own designs. And again, I'll put all the links down in the description for all the models that we used in our first impressions of the Matterhackers build series filament. But the Hookah Vase, this is at 100%. This turned out awesome, and I really love this blue filament because it is slightly translucent. And I did use a 0.24 millimeter layer height just to make sure I got a really good layer bonding. And this is a really solid vase. This is actually could be a functional one. I haven't tested to see if it's watertight yet, but it is a really good print, and I really love the way this blue filament looks. After that, I wanted to print out something I'd never printed before, so I went over to my mini factory and I just started looking around for a random print, and I found this awesome Dumbledore model from Harry Potter. And this is a highly detailed model, and there's just so much detail on here. It's just a really cool model to print, so I had to print it. And using the Matterhackers build series blue filament, it looks like blue glass. I mean, this is such a clean print. There was literally no wisping. There's no support needed on this model, which is a plus, and that makes it a lot easier to print. You won't have any surface scarring, and there were no real serious overhangs on the model either, so it really turned out awesome. I am super happy with the way this looks. I really love this Matterhackers blue filament, the build series filament, because of its slight translucent look. Like I said, it has kind of a glass finish to it, and you can totally tell in the close-ups. So with everything we printed, I can give you guys my first impressions of Matterhackers build series filament. Even though we did use this filament during the 365 project, we did start out with fresh settings and dialed them in until we got a good clean print before we proceeded in printing out all the models that you see here. All the models turned out really great. There were no problems with the prints whatsoever. We did burn this filament at 210 degrees, which isn't unusual for PLA. I've actually used that same temperature for other brands of PLA. The prints themselves, they have a nice glossy finish, and the PLA actually prints out super easy. This filament is also available in ABS and PETG along with the PLA in a variety of colors, and it's super affordable. So in my opinion, Matterhackers build series filament is some really great, affordable, easy to print with filament, and I highly recommend it. Well, that about wraps it up for this unboxing and first impressions of Matterhackers build series filament. I hope you guys found this episode interesting and informative, and if you're looking for ways to support the channel, check out those affiliate links down in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, comment, like, and share those videos, and I'll talk to you guys soon.